Hello there, this is James S. Crofty, just 1978, and having explained how I define art, what it is, and what it means in the video links down to the underbar, and been inspired by a video from the School of Life about the Renaissance, specifically its discussion of how the Medicis of Florence used their great wealth to finance art and architecture, and more importantly, how they and other patrons had a clear, unified vision and purpose, which made the art and architecture of Renaissance Italy some of the greatest in human history. In this video, I'll be talking about the purpose of art in the 21st century, and indeed every century beyond that. As always, the relevant links are all listed down in the underbar, and I ask everyone to please subscribe to the School of Life's YouTube channel. But before I begin though, it's important to point out that as a society in the 20th and 21st centuries, regardless of whether we've done so intentionally or not, we have all lost genuine respect for and appreciation of art, condemning it to the wasteland of being something nice which looks and sounds pretty and has no inherent meaning or value in itself. In fact, as a society, regardless of whether we understand or have ever even heard of it, we all appear to have subconsciously embraced Roland Barthes' concept of the death of the author, which, in a nutshell, grossly oversimplifying the concept for the sake of brevity, posits that the intentions of the creator are utterly irrelevant because all that ultimately matters is how the viewer, listener, or player interprets the art in question. However, as I explained in the video links down in the underbar, the intent of the creator is what defines art, at least as far as I'm concerned, and there is honestly no reason why we shouldn't define art in that manner, or at the very least consider the creator's intentions. So why is it then that so much of society seems to embrace the death of the author, often as a principle which they come to subconsciously of their own accord, without ever even thinking about it, declaring that art has no inherent meaning or purpose, and thus judging it solely by whether or not they like it? The fact that doing so is perfectly in line with the individualist consumerism which we have all been conditioned to embrace throughout the 20th and early 21st centuries, the way of thinking which teaches us that the only real question is whether we want to buy it or otherwise support it financially, and as a result that the only true measure of the value of anything is how much money it makes or how much money it is worth. Leading in turn to a backlash, with many artists over the course of the last century or so creating art, quote, for its own sake, deliberately defying this consumer culture by creating works which are neither nice to look at nor listen to by any commonly held aesthetic standard, but which are also inherently meaningless and created with no intention or purpose in mind beyond sticking it to the man, because of the even more fundamental reason why society has lost all respect for art, the deeply ingrained concept of democracy, in inverted commas, that is currently destroying all democratic politics around the world, which preaches that everyone's opinion is equally valid, and thus that the only truth lies in the eye of the beholder. These fundamental flaws and costs of capitalist democracy are also explained in another video by the School of Life, links down in the underbar, and truth be told, my favourite movie director of all time, Kim Ki-duk, is perhaps more guilty of this self-effacing democratic mindset than any other artist on the planet, because he insists that he doesn't know what his movies mean, and instead wants to discuss their meaning with the people who watch them, thus essentially declaring that his films are inherently worthless blank slates onto which we can project whatever we desire. But why would anyone, particularly an artist who's devoted over a year of his life to creating something, ever do this, even if it's only on a subconscious level, denying all intent, motivation and purpose in creating their art, and thus reducing it to a product which people will pay for if and only if they like it? The fact that to create art with clear meaning, purpose and intent is to have an agenda, and having an agenda is suspicious and even sinister in itself, isn't it? Because it means that we are trying to tell people what to think and feel instead of allowing them to decide for themselves, and isn't that automatically a bad thing? No, it's not. To date, I have published 2 books, the link to my website where you can find a description of them and on which you can find the links where you can purchase them if you wish, also being listed down as the underbar, with the express intention of provoking empathy in the readers. Why? Because I honestly believe that one of the greatest problems in the world today is that as a society we simply do not care enough. And therefore, I wrote my novella and my second collection of short stories for the same reason why I work so hard to share and promote the great Korean and Japanese cinema which moves me to tears, the fact that if we can all learn to feel genuine empathy for fictional characters, then maybe, just maybe, we can also learn to care about each other just as much here in the real world. But no, people don't want to watch sad films or read sad stories, and we should always give the people what they want, right? This slogan is another example of how individualist consumer culture has been embraced in our collective unconscious to the point at which we don't even notice it, let alone question it anymore, which is honestly a good thing for the corporations which pull our strings, because if you honestly believe for a single moment that the billions of dollars spent on advertising every single year, and even on charitable projects and campaigns funded by corporations whose names always feature prominently in all of the promotional literature, aren't spent for the express intention of influencing what we think and feel and thus conditioning us to want their products, then the truth is going to hurt. But as I indicated earlier though, too much of the response from artists and the rest of the counterculture, for lack of a better term, to this corporate indoctrination and brainwashing, aside from when they completely sell out to it, has been to create art in massive inverted commas, which means essentially nothing and says nothing beyond fuck the man, because they're individualists, and only the bad guys ever have an agenda, don't they? Thus ensuring that throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, modern art in particular would be dismissed by almost everyone as worthless rubbish and a joke, while the rest of art would be looked at for a few moments, debated, generally considered pretty, and then swiftly forgotten, because to quote the amazing atheist in one of the only videos in which I've ever actually agreed with him, yes, right now, only the bad guys have an agenda. That's why they're winning. Therefore, the first solution which I propose, one that was originally and indirectly suggested by the School of Life in the video which inspired this video, is that we need wealthy patrons such as the Medicis who not only fund art, but who have a well thought out vision and goal which they seek to advance through the art which they commission or otherwise fund, with artists who share their vision being welcomed into the fold. Indeed, if I were ever to score a massive win on the lottery or what have you, then this is precisely what I would do myself, and while many people would be suspicious or even openly critical of my push to, quote, indoctrinate people through art, as I've already mentioned, at least I'd be attempting to enrich people's spirits and improve society instead of merely boosting my own profits by selling more junk, which is the sole aim of corporate indoctrination at the moment, and B, I honestly hope that my indoctrination through art, in inverted commas, would motivate other millionaires and billionaires to advance their own agenda through art, because although this would inevitably lead to even more artistic and philosophical atrocities such as the Atlas Shrugged movie trilogy, at least like the fact that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are both currently running for president has killed the myth that there's no difference whatsoever between the Republicans and the Democrats, rival patrons with clashing visions promoting them through their funding of the arts would once and for all kill the toxic lie that true art only ever exists for its own sake. However, bearing in mind that my chances of ever having enough money to become a modern-day equivalent of a Medici are effectively zero, the other solution which I propose is a variation on the Kickstarter model, with projects receiving crowdfunding not merely because people like the idea, but because the project espouses and advances a philosophical ideal or goal, with, as before, different websites being created to fund projects which advance different visions and beliefs. But in the meantime though, bearing in mind that they are only ideas, the very fact that I've had to caveat both proposals, effectively preempting any critical and or doubtful comment by insisting that no, it won't only be a single person or movement imposing their worldview upon everyone else through the art which they commission and support, indicates just how deeply this fear of propaganda has been instilled in each of us. But although such doubt and fear is completely understandable, since in the 20th century and even to this very day, way, the only unified visions which have genuinely sought to spread their message through art and architecture are fascist and communist dictatorships, at least in part fueling the individualist backlash of the 1960s and beyond. Just because a tool can be and has been used for evil, that doesn't negate the possibility that it can be used for good. And from Greece and Rome to all of the great East Asian art, literature and poetry of the last several thousand years to the Renaissance, history has taught us repeatedly that the greatest, or at the very least most influential art, is created by societies which, at the very least, agree that art has value and generally agree what it is for. After all, as the video from the School of Life also explains, the greatest artistic eras of history, such as ancient Greece, the Renaissance and the Tang dynasty of China, did not come about because of luck or because there was something in the water which made artists more talented. Instead, it was because art was valued as a means of helping to create better individuals, a better society, and thus in turn a better world. And once as a society we all rediscover this respect for and appreciation of art, then it can help to create a better world once again.